Hey gamers, what is going on? We're back with a brand new video, and today we'll be discussing horror movie characters and if Batman could beat them, or if they could be Batman hypothetically. It's not exactly an Inmates of Arkham Asylum video, but we'll continue that series next week. So without further ado, let's get started. So throughout cinematic history, few franchises have become mainstays in culture. Of course, there are always going to be action heroes, cunning villains, heart-tugging tales, and fantastical adventures. But today we'll be looking into very different worlds of action and horror, more specifically Batman and horror villains. Now I want to preface how today is going to work. I want to discuss how Batman would fight certain horror villains, if he would win or lose, how difficult the villain would be for Batman to defeat, which we'll be using a tier list to mark on difficulty, and what would happen to the villain once they were defeated. I'm also only going to be using horror movies that I've seen portrayed in movies before, so I won't be using any villains that I haven't watched in movies before. With all this, let's get started. So this is the tier list of villains we'll be using today, the highest tier being the most difficult for Batman to defeat and the lowest being the most easy. Going through the roster real quick, it's really small, but we only have Ghostface, Newland from Thanksgiving, and Michael Myers. As stated earlier, we'll be assessing how Batman would encounter and deal with each villain, if he would win or lose, and what would happen to the villain if Batman were to win. Finally, we will place their difficulty level against The Dark Knight on the tier. I'll also have a brief overview of the movie in which the character first appears. So if you have not watched these and are wanting to, just go ahead and skip over the character in case you haven't already, to avoid any spoilers. Ghostface. A small town is rocked by a series of brutal murders committed by a masked killer known as Ghostface. High school student Sidney Prescott becomes a primary target, all while grappling with the anniversary of her mother's unsolved murder. As the body count rises, Sidney and her friends uncover shocking secrets, leading to a deadly confrontation with the true face behind the mask, who turns out to be Billy Loomis, Sidney's boyfriend, and Stu Macher. So let's create a picture of how Batman would encounter Ghostface. This is a little bit of a story. Following a string of crimes, all stemming from an anonymous phone call that ends in murder, Batman is able to trace the phone that Ghostface is using. Batman follows the trace to a house in the suburbs where he finds Ghostface hiding behind a bush facing the house. Unbeknownst to Ghostface, Batman is watching him make the call from a nearby tree. Suddenly, the back door of the house slides open and a young girl about 17 walks out, talking loudly on the phone. Batman turns his head to look at the girl when suddenly he hears the bushes rattle and watches as Ghostface runs out into the open, pursuing his victim. Batman jumps from the tree as he hears screams coming from the second floor of the house. As he steps inside of the house and into the kitchen, there's a hallway to the right and a door to the left. He can hear the girl sprinting down the downstairs hall and towards the kitchen. At the same time, Ghostface's heavy steps slam down the stairs. Acting quickly, Batman takes cover behind the wall leading to the hallway, just as the girl enters the kitchen and sprints out of the back door. Batman can hear Ghostface screaming as he charges towards the kitchen. As Ghostface nears the entrance of the kitchen, Batman steps out from behind the wall, creating a barrier between himself and the door. Ghostface raises his knife and begins to bring it down on the Dark Knight. However, Batman easily grabs the maniac's hand with one arm and, using his second arm, breaks Ghostface's elbow. Ghostface keels over, dropping his knife and grasping his now broken elbow. Batman takes the opportunity to take off Ghostface's mask, revealing the killer, Billy Loomis. Tying him to the front porch, Batman calls local police to pick up the deranged killer. As the story makes clear, Batman's confrontation with Billy would be relatively minor because Ghostface lacks pretty much all skills that any other killer on this list has. Ghostface is clumsy and not even threatening outside of his knife. Unlike many other killers shown on this list, it would only take someone who could disarm Ghostface to beat him. The Thanksgiving Killer. John Carver is the disguise the killer uses after the town's Thanksgiving mascot is revealed to be Sheriff Eric Newland, a trusted authority figure in the community. His motive stems from a tragic event during a Black Friday riot at a local store. His girlfriend Amanda and her baby were killed due to the crowd's greed and carelessness. Driven by vengeance, Newland orchestrates a series of gruesome murders, targeting those he deems responsible and symbolically punishing them through twisted Thanksgiving-themed killings. Here's how I imagine a confrontation would go. Following a lead of murders taking place during Thanksgiving, Batman goes to the site of another murder. At a local diner, a woman's body is found near the dish sink. The water is boiling and the woman has been drowned in the liquid. Upon analysis of the scene, however, the killer has made a mistake, foolishly leaving behind a fingerprint. Analyzing the print, Alfred assesses all fingerprints in the town's database and runs a positive ID on Sheriff Eric Newland. Just then, however, Batman receives a report of an urgent message made from a nearby laundromat. The report states that a young woman called the police hysterically screaming, "He's breaking in the door, send help." Batman makes his way over to the laundromat as he hears screaming coming from the inside. Peering through the door, he can see the entrance empty as he begins to hear crying from the back. John Carver, the masked killer, is looking at a woman who is crawling on the floor missing an arm. Carver turns around just as Batman enters. Jerking back a step, Carver tilts his head, assessing Batman for potential danger. However dangerous or not, Carver rushes towards the Dark Knight, swinging his axe as Batman narrowly dodges the blade. Taking a step back, Batman throws a batarang towards Carver. Carver turns his head just as the batarang misses, and watches as the weapon cases itself into a nearby wall. Taking the open window, Batman sprints towards Carver, jumping into the air and landing his foot straight into Carver's unsuspecting face. Carver's head slams violently to the ground as blood begins to drip from under the mask. As Carver stands, Batman readies himself. The killer's mask is broken and two snapped pieces fall to the ground as Sheriff Newland is left standing. His forehead is profusely bleeding and his smile reveals his mouth missing multiple teeth. "Give up," Batman says as he stares menacingly at Newland. Newland, however, is not finished and runs toward Batman again. However, the Dark Knight is ready, and he quickly grabs Newland by the back of the head and slams him on a nearby clothing prepping table, knocking him out instantly. Batman ties Newland's legs as he throws the other half of the rope around a wooden beam above them. Creating a pulley system, Batman pulls Newland to the air upside down as he calls the authorities. Once again, Sheriff Newland would not be a massive threat to Batman. While he has much more stamina and would be, however, he would have much more stamina and put up a much more difficult fight than Ghostface. Newland is also still just a normal man, and it would not take much out of Batman to defeat him. Michael Myers. Michael Myers is a silent masked killer who murders his sister at age 6 and escapes from a mental institution 15 years later to return to his hometown of Haddonfield. Unlike other horror villains, Michael's motives are ambiguous. He kills seemingly at random, though he fixates on teenage babysitter Laurie Strode. Later sequels, especially from the original timeline, reveal that Laurie is his younger sister, though in the 2018 reboot timeline, that connection is removed, making his pursuit of her purely driven by obsession or chance. Here's how I think a confrontation would go between Michael and Batman. After a recent police notification about an asylum inmate who has escaped, Batman goes to the last known location of the convict. At the time, Batman finds tire tracks and a nurse on the road. Racing towards the woman, Batman turns her body over to see multiple stab wounds to the face. Closing the woman's eyes solemnly, Batman receives another police notification. A young man was recently found dead with a pole driven through his forehead. Batman races to the scene where he discovers a pair of orange inmate clothing that belonged to the asylum, and the back of the shirt reads Patient Number 2000. As Batman continues to look at the clothes, he calls Alfred to search the asylum's database for Patient 2000. Alfred says the patient's name is Michael Myers, and he continues to tell Bruce that Myers is in for multiple life sentences after a total of 48 murders. Hanging up his communications, Batman calls for the Batmobile. As the Dark Knight continues to search Michael's database inside of the Batmobile, he receives another alert from a nearby paper business. Someone called the police saying that there was a strange man outside trying to get into the building. Batman races to the scene, finding the front door wide open and all of the building's lights on. Michael is inside of the building, walking through the winding, seemingly endless hallways. Hearing screams down the hall, he follows the sound. Peering inside of a room, he sees a woman in a suit crouched behind a desk, peering around the corner. As she spots Michael, the woman screams and picks up a stapler that's on the desk. Michael begins to walk closer to the woman as he hears a noise from the ventilation above his head. Taking the opportunity, the woman sprints out of the door to her left, which leads to the hallway.
Let's try that again.
Michael turns back to see that the woman is missing, and he walks out of the room, beginning to start in the same direction as her. As he nears a fork in the hallway, he sees a black figure sprint from one side of the wall to the other. Michael reaches the end of the hallway and turns his head left and then right, searching for the figure. Suddenly, he hears a clank from the right end of the hallway. Michael turns toward the noise, walking briskly. As he nears the origin of the sound, he looks down and sees a small metal object in the shape of a bat on the floor. Picking up the object, Michael looks up toward the end of the hallway. Standing at the edge is a demon-like creature with tall ears. Michael drops the bat-shaped object and begins to walk toward the demon. As Michael blinks, however, the demon disappears. A whimper is suddenly heard from straight ahead. Michael continues his search, following the noise. Rounding a corner, Michael suddenly sees the demon a foot from his face. Quickly taking his knife, Michael stabs the demon in the side as it lets out a yell. Just then, smoke begins to fill the room. Michael, weaponless, having stabbed the demon, watches as the smoke dissipates. When the hallway clears, Michael notices that the demon is gone. Another whimper fills his ear as Michael begins to walk towards the origin. Rounding into a cafeteria, Michael notices that the woman dressed in a suit is crying in the corner. Walking towards her, he picks up a plastic knife lying on the table and walks toward her. As he nears her, he raises the knife and stabs the woman's arm as she begins to run. As he begins to chase again, walking towards the edge of the building that separates the outside world by a glass panel. Suddenly, the lights turn out and Michael is left standing in pitch black. Just then, the glass to his left breaks and Michael is struck in the face. As Michael begins to slash effortfully at the empty air around him, the lights come back on. However, in rhythmic flicker, whatever punched him was gone. As Michael turned back towards the direction the woman ran in, he could see the demon again as the lights flickered on. But the lights turning back off and on again, the demon was now missing. Michael walked in the direction of the demon, changing his target. Once again, hearing the ventilation creak above him, Michael balled his fists and broke through the steel vent casing. Suddenly, a piercing pain ran down his body as he pulled out his hand to find another bat-shaped piece of metal. Michael peered through the hole he made in the vent as he felt a push on his left that knocked him over. Standing up, he saw the demon again. As the lights flashed, Michael began to stand. The demon stood watching him as Michael began to walk towards it. Raising his knife again, Michael drove it down just as the lights flickered. The demon was gone. Michael turned around and was immediately headbutted by the demon. As he began to increase in breathing, Michael felt his body being picked up and slammed into a nearby wall. The demon began mercilessly beating Michael to a pulp. As blood streamed from the mask, the demon took off the killer's mask, revealing Michael Myers. But Michael was not done yet. He stood up, took his knife, and briskly walked toward the demon. However, as the lights flickered again, Michael felt that he was walking into air. The lights turned back on, and Michael turned around. The demon was behind him, and he suddenly felt a kick to his back as he slammed into the glass panel. Michael fell from the building and neared the pavement. However, a sudden jolt to his legs stopped his fall. As blood rushed to his head, Michael heard sirens nearing his location and saw a chopper above him with light shining down. While this is the longest story, I feel more could have been said. A Michael Myers vs. Batman movie would be really cool and really interesting. I feel like Batman would notice Michael's movements off the bat and try to put him in a defensive position. Michael does not know what it feels like to be in defensive, and so he kind of probably doesn't know how to fight back either. And I think that would probably be his downfall as well. I feel that the fight would be really cool, but due to time constraints, I had to do the best that I could with this, so the story was not the greatest, but hopefully you guys got the gist. And yeah, well, that is it. Let me know how you guys enjoyed it in the comments, and if I should do another video. I think maybe I could do Terminator, Jason, and Bubba from Texas Chainsaw, so let me know if you guys want to see that. And yeah, thank you for watching. See ya.